But all right, guys, we're about to check out Delusions of the Mind. 3 terrifying mental syndromes by the channel. Is it Shrouded Hand? Yep, I'm subscribed to them. This is the channel Shrouded Hand from 5 days ago. Delusions of the Mind, 3 terrifying mental syndromes. You can check it out.
Hello everybody, Shrouded Hand here. You know, I talk about a lot of real world horrors on this channel, but one thing that I find particularly disturbing is disorders of the mind. I think it's because if I'm talking about something like a serial killer or some other atrocity, there's a sense that there's an escape from it, an end, but for someone who's going through mental illness, it's inescapable. It's their reality 24 hours a day. So today I'm going to look at 3 disturbing mental disorders that involve delusions, the belief in an external reality that doesn't really exist, but for the people going through it is extremely real, and in most cases extremely terrifying.
I've never thought of that. Like having a mental illness, that would be terrifying because it messes with your mind. That'd be scary. The Man in the Mirror. Oh God, what is that?
There are various conditions that can cause somebody to not recognize people who they were previously very familiar with.
Like amnesia?
One of the scariest manifestations of this particular perception disorder is a condition called mirrored self misidentification syndrome. In simple terms, when somebody with this syndrome looks at their reflection in the mirror, they see a stranger looking back at them. Here's an example from one case study. An 87-year-old man, after having a mini stroke, began to experience nocturnal hallucinations, seeing women and children in his house at night.
Oh God!
A year later, he and his family moved into a new house, and it was here that his family members noticed that he seemed incapable of recognizing his own reflection.
Guys, I've never heard of this before. Imagine looking in the mirror and you don't recognize the person looking back in the mirror. It's your own reflection, but you don't recognize yourself. That'd be terrifying.
He believed that his own reflection was another person who was following him around, not only in his home, but anywhere that there was a reflecting surface. He attempted to communicate with the person on numerous occasions and was somewhat perturbed that the stranger never replied, but was otherwise undisturbed by the stranger's presence.
What?
The report goes on to describe how his family members repeatedly tried to explain to him that it was just his reflection, and he was fully able to articulate what a mirror was and how it worked, yet he always maintained that
Hey, thanks, Cryptic Watcher. Appreciate it, man.
His reflection was a different person. After a couple of years, if he caught his wife's reflection in the mirror, he also started to think that that was a different woman. He stated,
He didn't even recognize his wife? Damn, bro.
I've met the stranger's wife, seen her. I don't think she talks either. In another case study, a 90-year-old man has a similar condition. He started to believe that his own reflection in the mirror was that of his father. And then 5 days later, he started to think that it was his father-in-law who had died 60 years ago. He could see him in any reflecting surface and believed that he was following him around. He tried to talk to him and...
His father-in-law died 60 years earlier and he thought his father-in-law was following him around? That's bizarre.
Recognized that the presence didn't answer him because he is mute. When his family tried to reason with him, saying that his father-in-law was long dead, he would answer, "That is true, but he is resuscitated like Jesus Christ."
What?
For the first 6 months, he was calm, and he even joked about the presence of his father-in-law in the mirror, saying, "Something must be wrong in my head when nobody else can see him." Later, he began to develop paranoid ideas about the presence in the mirror, believing that he wanted to harm him or his family. He began
Damn.
arguing with his reflection or asking his family to feed the father-in-law. Finally, his daughters decided to cover all the mirrors and reflecting surfaces in the house and asked for a medical evaluation.
They had to cover all the mirrors in the house because he was so confused. Mirrored recognition of others but not self in a patient with probable Alzheimer dementia. Damn.
Gentleman comes from another study. He appears to be able to recognize his wife's reflection in the mirror, but he sees a stranger standing next to her. The report describes how his delusion was exasperated by the COVID lockdowns. Being unable to leave his home, he felt as if he
doesn't even recognize himself.
With a strange man who would follow him around.
Oh.
He would often confront this stranger in the mirror, asking, "Who is this man? What is he doing in my house?" The cases have presented a role of elderly patients, and this is where you most often see this condition.
What happens if you stare in the mirror for a few hours? I'm not sure. Never done it.
In people with dementia, but it also presents in younger patients with brain damage or schizophrenia. In some cases, the patient believes that the reflected image in the mirror is a window into a different room. One study describes a patient attempting to reach into the mirror to retrieve objects that are reflected there. The two-factor theory of delusion states that for a delusion to take hold in a person's mind, it's not enough that they simply misperceive something, but that their mind needs to come up with a rationale that validates this misperception.
This is crazy, guys.
After all, if you looked into a mirror and saw a stranger reflected back, your first thought would probably be that you are hallucinating. You wouldn't think that it was actually a different person standing there. Delusions hinge on the mind being able to construct a narrative to justify the hallucination.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chelsea.
An explanation for its reality. Consequently, when a person has this syndrome, they need to turn the mirror person into an intruder. It becomes a relentless stalker that you can't escape anywhere you go. As such, a person with mirrored self-misidentification...
Oh, yeah, if you don't recognize yourself in the mirror, and like that elderly guy, he thought some random person was like following him around in his own house. Yeah, if you don't recognize your reflection, you're going to think there's just some stranger who won't leave you alone and just follows you wherever you go. That's creepy.
Syndrome suffers from a persistent feeling of paranoia and fear.
Yes.
A Mr. Nightmare video. The stories feel authentic.
Yo, thank you, Simon. Guys, we'll probably play Little Nightmares another night because we got a few more reaction requests. So next time I do a scary live stream, or if I do a reaction stream here, I'll start the stream a little earlier. So then when I wrap up the reaction stream, it won't be like past midnight.
Another distressing delusion is Ekbom syndrome, also known as delusional parasitosis. As the name suggests...
But guys, I just realized we're officially over $500. We're at $503 for the PC fund. Hey, that's a good start, guys. I started this fund a few weeks ago. I've been streaming, saving up money. Like I said, it's probably going to take 5 or 6 months to save up. But hey, over $500 already saved up. That is a good way to start. So thank you, guys.
Sufferers of delusional parasitosis believe incorrectly that their body has been infested by some sort of parasitic life form, and no amount of evidence otherwise can shake them off this belief. The most common symptom of Ekbom syndrome
parasites make me feel squeamish. Ugh.
Is the sensation of something crawling on or underneath the skin. This could be caused by a number of environmental factors: hot or cold weather, itchy clothing, static electricity, pollen. It could also simply be a figment of the imagination. It's amazing how easy
Hey, thank you, Z-Man. Appreciate it, bro.
It is to make a person feel something that isn't really there. What if I told you that as you listen to this now, You can feel a prickling, itching sensation right there, crawling along your arm.
Oh, no.
How many of you are now
Not a
trying not
bug.
to scratch that itch, even
Oh,
though
I'm
you know
doing
full
it.
well that there's nothing really there?
I scratched my
Now,
hand.
imagine if you felt that sensation all the time and you believed that it was caused by small creatures burrowing into your flesh.
Oh, gosh.
As I said, delusions persist because the mind constructs a narrative to justify the hallucination.
Hell no.
Those suffering from delusional parasitosis become so convinced of the infestation that they will often attempt to remove the parasite from their body so that they have a physical proof of the parasite's existence. One of the first clues that a patient has delusional parasitosis is something known as the matchbox sign. This is when a patient arrives in a doctor's office with a matchbox or a Ziploc bag or some other small container that supposedly contains the parasite that they've taken from their own body.
Damn.
Laboratory analysis of these samples invariably reveals them to be scabs, dead skin, clothing fibers, or hairs. Here's one particularly gruesome case from 2005 which highlights the horrible nature of attempting to remove parasites that aren't really there.
Oh, gosh.
A 67-year-old man from Brazil became convinced that his body was infested by thin red worms. He claimed that the only effective way to get rid of these worms was to use a razor blade.
Oh,
He would
no.
slice into his own scrotum and then try to pull out the worms. He then said he would leave the worms out in the sun to dry. This was apparently the only way to kill them. He did this extraction so frequently that he got infected and he started to suffer from blood loss. This got so bad that he was eventually hospitalized and needed a blood transfusion.
My goodness.
Whilst a delusion like the mirrored self-misidentification syndrome relies on some pretty serious impairment of the mind, brain damage, dementia, schizophrenia, delusional parasitosis is really just an extreme form of health anxiety or hypochondria, something that almost anyone could be susceptible to. A recent case from Nepal shows how
it's not even like, yeah, him trying to remove what he thought were like red worms from his body with a razor. That's gross by itself. But where he was doing it as a man, ugh, that makes me squirm a little bit. Oh my God.
Easily the delusion can be spread to another person. A 29-year-old Nepali woman was planting seeds in a paddy field. She was kneeling down up to her waist in the water and she thought that she felt something crawling up between her legs. She looked down and noticed a number of leeches near her feet and immediately became convinced that a leech had crawled up inside her body, forcing its way into her uterus. Her husband took her home and she began to complain of severe pains in her abdomen and felt the sensation of the leech crawling back and forth inside her body. A local priest compounded her delusion by telling her that the leech had made its way deep into her body and would need to be surgically removed.
I think the leech would die. If it got inside your body, it would die.
Symptoms getting worse, the woman went to a doctor and he referred her to a gynecologist. The gynecologist did an examination and determined that there was no leech and prescribed the woman diazepam for her anxiety. Over the following 4 weeks, the woman's fears grew stronger and the sensations of the leech crawling inside her body grew more and more painful. She was consumed by a fear that she would die from blood loss as the leech gorged itself unchecked inside her body. During this time, multiple times a day, she would obsessively reach up inside herself, trying to remove the leech, causing a significant amount of internal bruising. Her husband too had become convinced of the reality of the leech. Eventually he took her to a private clinic and there they performed a number of tests. These included x-rays and biochemical tests. These tests confirmed that there was no leech inside her body, but even so the woman and her husband could not be convinced that the leech wasn't really there. The report states that their delusional belief was further
this lady's crazy, I'm sorry. I think this lady's a little crazy.
Strengthened by local myths and cultural anecdotes in the community relating to vaginal leech infestation. It was a legend that seemed to be common among the Nepali farmers in the area.
Oh,
here we
it's just a myth. It's not something that even happens. It's like just a rumor.
have 3 different types of delusions. Delusional parasitosis combined with folie à deux, where 2 people share the same delusional beliefs. The third factor is the culture-bound delusion. This is a condition that only occurs in one particular culture, a delusion that's shaped by local beliefs and norms.
The unseen audience. Oh God, what is this? Schizophrenia?
The final type of delusion that I want to look at here could also be considered culture-bound. I don't think this condition could have existed before the invention of reality television.
What's up,
and it
Travis?
probably occurs a lot more frequently in countries that televise a lot of hidden camera shows. Although the type of paranoid thinking that leads to this particular delusion taking root has existed for thousands of years. The condition is known as the Truman Show syndrome. If you've seen
Oh my God, that's a good movie. I love that. That's a really good movie, The Truman Show.
the movie, then most likely you know what this involves. For those that haven't seen it, The Truman Show is a movie about a guy whose entire life is one big reality TV show. Although he is completely unaware of it, he lives in a neighbourhood that is actually a giant movie set. His neighbours and family are all actors, and there are hidden cameras recording his every move.
Wait, so is this mental syndrome right here, number 3? Is this like someone who like makes up a whole fantasy inside their head, like they're living a life that they're not really living, like made up in their head, I guess?
As the name implies, those suffering from Truman Show syndrome believe that they are the main character in their own personal hidden camera reality TV show.
That's
In most
weird.
cases, these people are suffering from paranoid schizophrenia.
Yep, schizophrenia, that's what I said.
The term Truman Show delusion was coined in a paper by Joe and Ian Gold. In the paper, they describe a number of patients who seem to be gripped by this belief. In one case, a man was actually working on a reality TV show, and over time...
Guys, like with all the amount of security cameras and stuff nowadays, like you go to Walmart, you go anywhere, there's like security cameras everywhere, you know what I mean? So a person with the Truman Show syndrome, if they see like a camera, like a security camera in Walmart or a store or like a restaurant or something, they think they're being filmed. They think they're like the main character and like the camera's watching them or something. Ugh.
He became convinced that he was the one being filmed. I thought I was a secret contestant.
We have 23 likes. Bobby, on my end, it shows 51 likes. So maybe refresh your page. It shows 51 likes on my end.
On a reality show. I thought that I was being filmed. I was convinced that I was a contestant, and later the TV show would reveal me. He believed his thoughts were being controlled by a film crew.
Oh, you did
paid for by
Underground?
his family.
Dang.
As this delusion took hold, he became increasingly erratic and was eventually hospitalized and treated for a manic episode brought on by a bipolar disorder. In another case, after watching the Truman Show...
Oh, God. Bipolar mixed with schizophrenia, that can't be a good combo. Jeez.
A man became convinced that his family members were actually actors, that cameras had been installed in his eyes, and that events on the news were being fabricated in an attempt to control him. For 5 years, he lived with this belief, playing along so that his family members didn't know that he was onto them. He was eventually arrested in New York after getting into a fight with security at a federal building. He believed that the 9/11 attacks were fake, and he travelled to New York to prove that the Twin Towers were still standing.
What?
Upon being arrested, he demanded to talk to the director
That's
of the
crazy.
TV show that he was starring in.
Yeah, right, Maggie?
The Gold's paper goes on to describe how the onset of schizophrenia is characterised by a sense that everything has undergone some subtle, all-encompassing change. The mind tries to make sense of this change, and it reaches out for a rational explanation. Hidden cameras, fake news, family members replaced with actors.
Fake news.
There's a few quite sinister moments in the Truman Show movie. Slight spoiler warning here. Truman starts to realize that he's in a TV show, and the actors
He's
around
being
him
watched.
know that he knows, and you can see this sudden shift in them. Their smiles suddenly become very forced, and there's this weird glint in their eyes as they try to convince him that everything is normal. That must be what it's like for the people suffering from Truman Show delusion. Nobody can be trusted. Everyone's out to deceive you. Every moment of your life is being exposed to the world, and
yeah, imagine living life and just constantly thinking everyone's out to get you and everything's like some big conspiracy theory. That'd be stressful mentally for that person.
people around you have a vested interest in keeping the illusion going. The most tragic case of Truman Show delusion is probably that of Anthony Waterlow from Sydney, Australia. Anthony had had a long history of paranoid schizophrenia. He believed that he was the target of a game show that was being broadcast on the internet.
A game show?
He believed that his neighbours had run cables through his house and installed hidden cameras which were watching him at all times. He thought that his family were all in on the game.
What's up, Crusader?
They were
I'm
using
good, bro.
computers and satellites to control his thoughts. The aim of the game show, he thought, was for either his family members to murder him or to mind control him into taking his own life. As a result of this paranoia, he had attacked and threatened his family members and his neighbours on a number of occasions. He was seen multiple times by psychiatrists between the years of 2004 and 2007, but Anthony always refused to take any form of antipsychotic medication, and he remained convinced of the reality of this worldwide game show at his expense. At no point during this process was he ever forcibly hospitalized, despite his family's attempts to get him help.
Yeah, as far as I know, my kids have school tomorrow. We're supposed to have some snow tomorrow night or Tuesday, but I think they have school tomorrow, as far as I know.
And reports from friends and family members about his increasingly violent behaviour. These reports included Anthony telling a friend that it was getting to a point where he would have to kill someone.
Damn!
Then,
calm down, bro.
November 2009, tragedy struck.
Oh,
Anthony
no.
and his father went together to his sister's house. They were there for a family meal.
Is he going to do something to his sister, hurt her?
Around the table were Anthony, his father, his sister, and his sister's 3 children.
Oh, no.
During the meal, Anthony believed that he'd overheard his father and sister talking about how they were going to use their mind control powers to make Anthony have a heart attack. In an act of delusional self-preservation, Anthony grabbed a kitchen knife and stabbed his sister and father to death. In the attack, he also slashed the face of his 2-year-old niece. She was
only 2 years old? Oh my gosh, I hope the kids escape. I mean, I feel bad for the sister and the dad, but the poor kids?
Later found kneeling next to her mother's dead body.
Oh, she was killed?
Anthony evaded the police for 3 weeks. When he was finally arrested, he was found to be in a highly agitated, paranoid state.
That's so sad.
It was only after being given antipsychotic medication that he finally realized the horrible nature of his own actions. During his court hearing, he made the following statement. I wanted to say that since I have been treated on the right medication, the symptoms of schizophrenia have slowly gone away. This is a good thing, but also a terrible thing, because it makes me aware of the awful realities of what I have done.
Well, at least he's aware of it.
Never in my wildest dreams did I think I could kill Chloe and Dad, but I did. If I could give my life to bring them back, I would. I am terribly shattered by what I have done. I miss my family incredibly. I am so sorry, and I will be for the rest of my life.
I wonder if he'll be in prison for the rest of his life, or because he had schizophrenia and now he got put on medication to help with that, if he'll be let out eventually. Because it's like he wasn't in his right mind when he unfortunately ended the life of his dad and sister, but he also did kill 2 people. So I don't know, will he be in prison for life, or since he's on medication now, will they eventually let him out? I don't know how I feel about that, guys. It's really a tragedy, really sad, but he wasn't in the right state of mind when he did it. So I don't know about that
Ultimately,
situation.
Anthony Waterlow was found not guilty on the grounds of mental
Oh my God, he was found not guilty? I wasn't expecting that.
illness. The judge ordered that Anthony be kept at Long Bay Prison Hospital or any other place that may be determined by the Mental Health Review Tribunal until released by due process of the law. I haven't been able to find any...
So he was found not guilty, but he was sent to like a mental hospital to be evaluated, and then they'll eventually let him go. I don't know how I feel about that, guys. Because it's not like Anthony just went out and cold murdered his dad and sister, you know. He clearly had a lot of mental issues with schizophrenia, and that now they put him on medication to help. But what if they let him out? He's back in society and he stops taking his medication. Is he going to go crazy again?
follow-up articles that say whether he's been released or not. Maybe there's some kind of gag order or patient confidentiality thing there, so I'm not sure where he is now.
All right, Bobby.
General consensus seems to be that this killing was entirely preventable if doctors had done more to get Anthony the treatment he needed early on.
That's really sad.
So there you are, 3 examples of mental delusions that are, in most cases, a living hell for the people experiencing them, and as we've seen, can have extremely tragic consequences. I hope you found this video interesting. I wanted to give a little personal anecdote at the end here, but I'm not attempting to make the video about myself or anything, but I think when we hear about cases of delusion, we kind of assume that we wouldn't fall into this kind of delusional thinking.
True.
A few years ago, I was going through a pretty rough time in my life. I started getting really bad anxiety. From the moment I woke up until I went to bed, I felt like I was having a constant panic attack. I couldn't breathe properly and I felt this cold sweat all over my body. I was just ended up lying there all day on the sofa, unable to take my mind off
anxiety sucks when you feel stressed out and anxiety.
Must have been looking around for something to attach the anxiety onto.
Deontay, what's up?
I started seeing this shadow figure following me around.
What?
Usually it'd be when I was climbing the stairs for some reason. I'd see it like a dark form just behind my shoulder, walking up behind me.
Well, that's not creepy at all. A dark form, if I can talk, geez. That wouldn't be creepy at all.
I'd turn around quick and the figure would vanish, but I'd feel this lurching shock feeling in my chest whenever it happened. I started to think I must be going crazy. Luckily, I was able to talk it through with a doctor, and he put my mind at ease a bit. He said it was just a symptom of the anxiety and it went away eventually. But I could see how, with a bit more of a push, something like that could have developed into a full-on psychosis.
It can make you lose your mind.
Been able to
go crazy.
What if I started to believe that the figure was actually there? It's scary to think, but our minds might be a lot more fragile than we imagine. So I guess
it could happen to any of us
if you're experiencing something like that. Anyway, I just want to say a big thank you to anyone who is supporting the channel.
Well, all right, guys. This was Delusions of the Mind, 3 Terrifying Mental Syndromes by Shrouded Hand. Gonna leave a like on the video. That was very interesting, guys. A couple of those mental syndromes I've never heard of before. Very, very interesting.